We want to talk with you about the books that feed your imagination and the vices that spark your soul.
We drink, we curse, we read things. Come sit by us. Expect no judgment, just good times.
Welcome to Paper and Vices. Books reviewed, vices indulged.
Mature content warning. I am Lee Vices.
I am Victoria Papers, and as we've discussed, this is my legal name. And tonight, we have a very special guest with us, an amazing writer, drinker of coffee, RITA award winner, if I'm correct, wearer of kick-ass hats. Jeffe Kennedy has decided to grace us with her presence, so thank you so much.
Oh, I'm excited to be here.
We are super excited to have you. So I will ask you first, Jeffe, what are you reading this week?
I have been reading a bunch of different things. I've been reading a couple of reverse harem paranormal romances because I was curious. And now I have settled into the second book in Dana Martin's fantasy romance trilogy. And so I'm reading The Accidental Sorceress.
That sounds really familiar. I've done a few reverse harems. They're not... Some of them are done incredibly well, and some of them I'm just like, not my thing. But I think it's like with anything else, like any other novel, really. It depends on what they do with the character building. Does that make sense?
With the trope, yeah. You know, juggling that many men sometimes just feels exhausting to me.
Yeah.
Amen.
I mean, you're right. I mean, like one is plenty.
Yes.
Sometimes more than.
Yes.
So true.
This is why God made girls' weekends. This is fine. I am reading The Promised Queen, which you sent me a NetGalley widget for forever ago, and I'm just now like 3 chapters into it. Because, like, when you do a podcast about books, like, I thought my to-be-read list would not get any longer. It's a thing. But before The Promised Queen, I just finished Crescent City, and that was interesting. It's so different than anything else Moss has written. I did not like it at first. I totally grew into it, and I'm, like, excited for the next book, which they just announced the title of. It's House of Breath and Sky, I think. But I like, so it's funny. I started reading The Court of Thorn and Roses, and then I went back and read all of A Throne of Glass. And Lee started with Crescent City, and then she sent me a copy of A Court of Thorn and Roses when she started reading it, because she's like, okay, we have to read this together. And that's what we do. We get drunk, and at 2:00 in the morning, we send each other books.
It's a thing.
Sounds like a beautiful friendship.
It is. I'm blessed. And so I'm reading it, and it starts so differently than any of Moss's other stuff. Like, just the flow of information is so different. And the main character almost seems like a Mary Sue at the beginning. And then you hit this part in like the 4th or 5th chapter. Like, it wasn't bad, but it didn't catch me like some other stuff does. And then it's like, oh, yeah, she thinks of herself as a Mary Sue. That's why. Never mind. I'm good now.
Well, it's funny because you messaged me. I think it was like 2 a.m. It was like, what is this? This is some bullshit. Like, what am I reading? And I was like, just wait.
One of Lee's pet peeves is info dumping, which, depending on who does it, I'm a big fan of info dumping. Like, when Elona Andrews does info dumping, it's always like a small story within a story within a story. And I just felt like so much information was vomited at me in the first 10 pages of Crescent City. I messaged Lee and I was like, this is not what I was expecting. This is the thing you don't like. I am confused. What are you reading, Lee?
I am actually wrapping up, because we've talked about this before. I have the horrible habit. Maybe I shouldn't say it's horrible, but it's my habit of reading like 3 different books at the same time. And that's even more true now that I have new outlets for reading, or mediums, I should say. So I'm still wrapping all my books up that I've started. So on my phone, I am working on Dracula, and my corporeal book is Iron Chain by Cassandra Clare. And then I am catching up on The Fiery Crown. I've got about chapter 11-ish, I think. And that's my Audible book, which is really interesting to be, like, I have to choose when I read, like, listen to it, because it's not family friendly. So.
Can't be playing that on the car radio, right?
Exactly. Like, I had this thought the other day where, like, I had a chance. I was on the way to an appointment, and just I have an almost 9-month-old, so I'm like, she doesn't care. It's fine. She can hear the word cock. It's okay. So I'm listening to it, and I'm like, oh my god, like, what if the like, I don't know, there's all this smart technology in the cars, and I'm like, someone's probably listening in going, oh my god, what is this woman listening to as she's speeding down the highway?
Now you start getting all sorts of ads, like,
yes,
sex
right?
toys. And...
Yeah. Ooh.
Oh man. but no, it's really good. It's fun. I'm at the part they're getting to. They've left the palace, and I think they just arrived, or they're close to arriving in that coastal city. This is the bad thing about the Audible books for me, is I tend to be pretty visual. So if I don't see the names of the cities, like, I'll quickly forget them. But there's that coastal city where they go. And that's about where I'm at.
Kadizika. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dude, the end of this book, which you are not at, made me sad cry and then made me happy cry. Like, there were sort of tears.
Oh, that's so nice, though. I love it when readers cry. That's
Yeah.
You're like, I've gotten to you. You understand.
Oh yeah.
Do you cry when you write it?
Sometimes yes. Not a whole lot, though. I know some writers do, but I will get very emotional about it. If my characters have, like, a big fight, I'll be totally bummed out for like the rest of the day. Yeah, it's like, oh my god, I can't believe they got in that fight. Now they're never gonna get together, and it's awful.
Oh no.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Lee and I are working on a project together, and there was one part I wrote that I ugly cried. Like, ugly cried. My husband came upstairs at like 1:00 in the morning. The next day was his day off, and he'd been downstairs smoking a cigar and playing video games. And he just gave me a hug, and he's like, is this real sad or writing sad? And I'm like, it's writing sad. And then when Lee read that part, she's like, this is really well written, but this is so emotionally heavy that I think I would put back down the book and not come back. And I'm like, well, oh, so I'm hoping that wears off. No, I can totally see being bummed about your characters getting in a fight. That makes sense. What's everybody drinking?
I am drinking The Prophecy.
Oh.
It's some red blend with a cool cover. My husband brought it home. I was like, get me wine. I need wine for recording, please. And he's like, I'm on it. And this is what he brought me. So, yay.
I think it's funny that you said a cool cover. I mean, label, right?
Yes, label. Oh my God. Yeah. I have started drinking said wine.
Now I want wine with classic bodice ripper covers for the label.
That would be awesome, wouldn't it? I would buy that.
Oh yeah.
This is a bottle of 2018 Pulsing Member.
Watch out for those turgid reds.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you drinking, Jeffy?
I am drinking rosé wine. I'm chagrined to admit that it is a box wine, but it is my...
No shade.
No shame. Thank you. I'm in the right place. It is what my mother refers to as my guzzle wine.
We call it mommy juice around here. And when you take your
mommy juice,
beautiful, loquacious 6-year-old to Target, she'll stand at the end of the aisle and say so loudly, "Mommy, do we need to get you some bottles of special mommy juice?" I am drinking something called Churn from Trader Joe's. It's a Chardonnay, so we've covered all the colors here. Good to know.
Have.
Oh.
I am drinking what is the equivalent of 3 glasses out of a glass mug shaped like a skull, because it's the closest I can get to drinking out of the skulls of my enemies.
We take what we can. Yes.
Yes. And it's called Churn, and it has a butter churn on the front because it's supposed to be so buttery and smooth.
Okay.
And I'm like,
That's so random.
It's totally random, but it's a Trader Joe's wine. And it's one of their like kind of weird ones, but it's good. It's good. It's pretty smooth, very fruit forward. Like the label did not lie. Smooth and fruit forward.
Well, we are Trader Joe's sisters because my box rosé is the Trader Joe's box rosé.
Amen. Amen.
Yes. And I have Trader Joe's plants too, so.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes. Trader Joe's is the place. This is the sad thing about moving out in the country. I'm going to be like an hour and 10 minutes from Trader Joe's. So I'm just going to have to put a cooler in the back and do like a stock up trip every couple weeks.
And then you could buy
I have
like
a friend
5
who calls that like going to town for provisions.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. That's going to be the thing. We go to Trader Joe's for provisions every time we do a girls trip. So Lee and I have our friend the Valkyrie that we've mentioned on the show before, and we try to go every year, but the last 2 years it just didn't happen. So this year we're going on a trip, and every time we go to Trader Joe's and get booze as God intended.
As God intended.
That's right.
My advice for this week is I found this company that makes wax melts that smell like the bath bombs from Lush. It is my new favorite thing.
It's not made by Lush, but it smells like them.
No, it's a dupe. But yeah, it smells like them. So I've got, that bright citrusy scent when you walk in a Lush store, but it's technically called Avo Bath, but it doesn't smell anything like avocados. That's what my clean house smells like right now.
Nice. My vice this week is actually it's a little strange, and actually I didn't even think to count it as a vice until I went on a 10-minute rant about how great they are. And then Victoria's like, "No, this is your vice for the week." And I'm like, "Yes, it is." So I got earplugs. Like, you know how like Facebook advertises to you? I guess Facebook had been listening in and hearing about how some of my anxiety is triggered by noise. I have 3 children, and they are so loud. I'm like, when I'm cooking dinner, sometimes wine is not enough. I need just the volume turned down. And these, they're called loop earplugs, and they're marketed to where you could still hear if somebody's like dying, but it just kind of takes everything down like 20 decibels so that you could kind of manage your noise, like the noise a little bit. And I love it. They're amazing. So.
Oh, that sounds so cool.
It's weird when you, like, it still sounds like an earplug in the sense, like, when I talk, it's, like, I still feel kind of in an echo chamber, and I can't eat with them in, because it's just, that's too much. It's too weird. It's good when I'm not talking a lot, and when I'm not eating. When the kids are screaming, it's fantastic. So, that's my vice. It's a non-traditional vice. So what about, I was going to ask Jeffe if she has any particular vices this week that are keeping her going.
So it can be any kind of vice at all.
Mm-hmm.
I would say anything that isn't necessary to life that's keeping you going.
I see. So like not air or wine. But
no air, not wine, not paying your rent or mortgage.
So normally I save my calories for wine, but my husband does the grocery shopping. And speaking of Trader Joe's, he brings me back occasionally those brookies. Have you guys had brookies?
Yes.
Is that a brownie and a cookie?
Yes.
Yes, it's brownie on the bottom and chocolate chip cookie on the top. So it's got like the gooey browniness on the bottom and then a little bit of the slightly crunchy chocolate chip cookie thing on the top. And that it's just like the most, and you can have these little squares of them. So it's not like too terrible, but oh my God, they're so good. I had 2 of them tonight.
Oh my God, my mouth is watering just like thinking about that. It's
I like
amazing.
They're so
those.
good. They're insanely good.
Those with like decaf espresso and trash TV at like 11 p.m. on a Friday. That's a good time.
Sounds like a good time.
Could totally see that.
Yeah. Since we have you here, Jeffe, we're probably going to pick your brain about a million things. In general, we've talked about it on the show a few times, but I know that The Promised Queen comes out the week that we're airing this episode. So how are you feeling about that? How do you feel about how the Forgotten Realms have been received? Do you have any further plans for them in the future?
Well, it's always interesting when you complete a trilogy like that. It's a wrapping up, and there's always a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of postpartum depression with it, right? A little bit of sadness. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess this big thing that I've been thinking about for a few years is done. We originally my agent sold this trilogy to St. Martin's. And so I knew it was going to be a 3-book deal. And St. Martin's decided, I think like a year ago, in the middle of the freaking pandemic. I mean, so like the first book, The Promised Queen, came out in September of 2019. And The Fiery Crown, the second book, came out a year ago, May of 2020. So in some ways, this has been a real pandemic trilogy. And so nothing has been the same for it. And so St. Martin's decided, I guess it was probably last fall, that they didn't want any more books in this world, which it's not a huge surprise unless something like really is a wildfire. They pretty much don't want to keep going with it. Like I know people with very successful series that their publishers like, oh, well, we didn't sell 1 million copies, so we don't want any more, because they tend to really want the big sellers.
You do a lot of things in the world of the 12 Kingdoms. Remind me, those are all traditionally published?
Yeah, those were with Kensington.
Okay.
Different publisher, not one of the big 5, but a more boutique publisher. I don't know, mid-level. Kensington does a lot of different stuff. So I did 5 books. I did the original 12 Kingdoms trilogy, and then we did the 2 more Uncharted Realms books. And then Kensington didn't want to keep going with those, although they did have me do that spin-off trilogy with their imprint Rebel Base, where I did the Chronicles of Desneria trilogy.
Which, for anyone wondering, those stand alone. Like, if you just want to read the Chronicles of Desneria, just do it. They're so damn good. Sorry.
So speaking of Chronicles of Desneria, I was thinking about that before, and I don't want to spoiler, but in Warrior of the World, in the 3rd book of that trilogy, when everything is going really, really well for Ivariola and she's having a great time and she's working with the elephants and everything, and I realized all of a sudden I'd like hit the midpoint of the book, and I realized that it was all going to go really, really badly and terrible things were going to happen. I was like so upset I had to stop writing that day.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I was like, no. It was all going so well. She was so happy.
Doesn't anyone just want a book of fluff? Doesn't anyone just want that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, those elephant parts made me cry too. I'm just going to throw it out there. Like, elephants are very special. Anyway, yeah, I cried when it started to go bad, so I get it. So they decided they didn't want any more of the Forgotten Realms. They were like, these 3 are enough.
Right. And so yeah, now I can do whatever I want to in that world. And I just haven't thought about it too much yet, because that's the thing about traditional publishing timelines. You all are just now getting to reading book 3, The Promised Queen. So I'll just sort of see if people want more in that world. I mean, you kind of gauge it by what readers say to and what they say they want. And I might do more in that world. I get a lot of requests for more Ambrose stories. That's the
Yeah, oh,
number one thing
I
I
could
hear.
see that. Yeah. I'm not to the end of The Promised Queen yet, like I said, and I'm very curious to see what happens with him. And I just get the vibe that it's not going to be as nicely wrapped up for him as I hope it is for other people. Cuz he's very well written for a wizard. He's written like a wizard. He's not written like a dude with magical powers. He's a wizard. They're weird. They're their whole own thing. And I feel like sometimes in modern fantasy that gets forgotten and a wizard is just a dude with power. But no, wizards are weird guys. And I like that Ambrose is weird.
I'm glad, because I wanted him to be like someone with a very different perspective on the world and on time and all of that.
He definitely has. Is it the last book in the Hitchhiker's Guide for the Galaxy, the original 7-book run, where the guide actually becomes sentient and it's looking at Arthur Dent and it's like, oh, time still flows that way for you, does it? Like, Ambrose gives me those vibes.
I could see that. Yeah. I think you'll be interested in the ending. I'm trying to think of a way to, yeah.
I mean, I'll let you know within a week, so.
Okay. I'll be interested to hear.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm late to the party. I'm like, Ambrose has a bigger part. He's so cool. I'm trying to pick up little crumbs. I'll get there.
Yeah, there's not as much that happens with him in the Fiery Crown. I mean, there's some.
Okay.
But then it builds, I guess. It's the best way to put it.
Gotcha.
And then I don't remember because we were recording this a few weeks out, like we record all of our episodes. Does the next one it's not called the Super Sexy Wizard series, Bonds of Magic. Does that one?
I should have made that be the series title, right?
Yeah. Bonds of Magic. Does that come out before or after The Promised Queen? I don't remember. I think it's after.
It comes out after. So
okay.
The first book is Dark Wizard.
So
and
good.
Then the second, yay, thank you. The second book is Bright Familiar, and I'm writing it right now, and that comes out in July.
That cover is so good. I remember.
I'm so glad that everyone likes that cover because it's very much how Nick looks in my head, but I wasn't sure if everyone else would think so.
Yeah, no, it fits. It clicks. Sometimes when I read a novel, I don't necessarily have, particularly if it's a series, particularly in the first book, I don't necessarily have a very clear picture of like someone's face, like a character's face, and that kind of like fills out more as the series goes on. Does that make sense? But this cover just kind of it just kind of clicks. So I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I'm down with that. I like both the covers for this so far. And covers are like, dude, I have never published a book, but covers seem like the most intimidating crap ever because you have to do it within the genre, but you don't want it to look like every other book in the genre.
Yeah, it's an acquired skill. I used to be happy to be with Trad because they would do the covers for me. But then you only have to have like one or two covers that feel really wrong, and then they tell you they don't care and tough it, that you start to get a lot more interested. And if you find a good cover artist, and I have this brilliant cover artist that I can like send her a paragraph of description and she'll send me back an image and say something like this and she'll just nail it.
Nice.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a talent right there.
Yeah.
It is. It is.
Did I just hear you say that you have a book coming out in July and you're writing it now?
Yes, because it's self-pub. So totally different timeline.
Oh, okay. I was like, really? Like that fast of a turnaround? like wow. Okay. Never
you can
mind.
do that with self-pub. So I'm a hybrid author. I do pretty much half and half between traditional publishing and self-publishing. And so, yeah, like this book, I'm figuring on finishing the draft by, I think right now my goal is June 11th. And then with revision and proofreading and formatting and getting it uploaded in time for the retailers and so forth, I have to have the finished done by like July 5th.
Gotcha. Well, that's kind of cool because it gives you that, like, I'm a deadline person. I work so much better if I've got like a little bit of pressure. So that's cool that you're able to still, because I guess one concern about self-publishing that I've kind of, I don't know, deadlines are sometimes a double-edged sword, but I don't know. I guess being able to set your deadline, but making it to where, like, at this point you have a pretty big audience, so they're expecting it. So it's a little bit, I don't know, it's a little bit more pressure. Yes?
It is. And I've certainly missed self-publishing deadlines before. And, readers, you guys are all wonderful people. You're all like, okay, yes, I'm going to die because you didn't get this to me on the date you promised, but that's okay. You take care of yourself because all we really care about is that you do write this book.
This was me waiting for the last Sorceress Moon's book.
Oh my God. Yeah, sorry.
But
that was
it was
bad.
good. It was good. It was totally worth the wait. And
it was a year. It was a year. And that was I regret that happened, and that was just a big miss on my part. Basically, what happened was I ended up with my agent got me 2-3 book deals with traditional publishing.
Yeah,
and it was like it just that's what happens. The self-publishing deadlines have to give because nobody will make you give their money back if
yeah.
or
No, I get it. You have to write what will keep the lights on. I think, especially when it comes to self-publishing, because another author that I fangirl over a lot, Elona Andrews, and I forget, like, watching you guys on Facebook, who knows who, because I like you and
I know Ilona and Gordon, yeah.
Yeah. So they're totally transparent on their blog, much like you are in First Cup of Coffee, about how this stuff works. And so is Grace Draven, who I also absolutely love.
And she's one of my best friends.
Yeah.
She's the one that I text at 2 a.m, like you guys.
Aww. You two are so friggin' cute. And then Ilona is like that with Jeannie Frost, I believe, or at least that's how it seems. Like, you guys are all really transparent about, hey, if I get a book deal, I have deadlines from huge corporations and there are much more people working on this. And there's also this sense of you have to write what keeps the lights on. Like Miss Grace, I will read everything she puts out ever because she's amazing. I don't know if we're going to get another one in the Gaslight Hades series at this point. And that makes me sad because that was an amazing book.
You actually are. I could tell you that she's got Gaslight videos partially written.
Nice.
And she is going to finish it. So.
That's awesome. I'm excited for that. But if she doesn't, like, there's this understanding that, like, Elena calls it the book devouring horde. I think there's got to be, and some of the things they post that their fans just put as comments, I'm like, are you for real? These people are artists that have to put food on their table and keep their lights on. Like, just friggin' say thank you and buy the book. Like, I think there's an understanding there with the majority of readers that it's like what my concern with Sorceress Moon, and I think I messaged you or your assistant or someone on Facebook at one point, I just wanted to know that it was going to get finished at some point. Like, if it's finished on my 45th birthday, I don't care. I just want to know at some point. And it did, and I was fine with it, and it was great and worth the wait. But when it seems like it's really complicated sometimes when you're a hybrid and you have to make some really unpleasant calls about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it can be, it's just can be some complicated juggling. That's all there is to it, yeah. But I think I'm better at it now. I'm better at sort of planning and saying no to some things. That's one thing about, like earlier on when people say, hey, let me give you this book deal. And you're just like, yes, 1,000 times, yes. And then later it's like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't say yes to everything.
And it's so weird because, like, if you are considering becoming a writer now, like say our kids become writers, who knows what the publishing industry will look like then? But even now, you have people like Shannon Mayer, which to my knowledge, everything she's doing now, or most of it, is self-published. And so it's like there's two complete paths, and then there's the third path, which is hybrid. And so it's almost like, do you want to be traditionally published, or do you want to start grassroots and build yourself up and have complete control over what your book cover fonts are?
Yeah, and I kind of feel like that, and I'm sort of operating on this premise, is that most authors are going to end up being hybrid to some extent in the future.
Interesting.
That makes
sense. It's sort of an eggs in many baskets thing, and you want to diversify your revenue streams and all of this, and there's just going to be, I think, multiple kinds of opportunities to publish books. With a lot of self-publishing, a lot of self-publishers have begun publishing other people's books under their aegis, which starts to make them into a small publishing house. And so there's going to be this whole spectrum, I think.
It's really interesting. And so on the one hand, I have Kindle Unlimited, so I will read the first 4 chapters of anything. Like, I read Kissing the Coronavirus, and it was only 16 pages because it was on Kindle Unlimited. And so on the one hand, the bar of entry is really low. Like, you can definitely tell there are some people that finishing a book is a wonderful thing, and I'm not going to shade anyone for that. Like, that is amazing. But there are some things that you're like, this book is a 2, and it could have been a 4 with another editing pass. Just because of those little things that, like, take you out of the story. But on the other hand, so many people that never would have gotten through the slog of traditional publishing and querying an agent and then going through all of that, like, you have access to their work, and that's amazing. Or
people who write just too weird for trad, that's like a little too sideways of what they want.
Yeah, like back to Elona and Gordon, like, Innkeeper probably wouldn't have gotten traditionally published. It is absolutely
probably not.
Is absolutely one of my favorite sci-fi series for exactly the reasons that it never would have gotten published, because it's too weird, it's too niche, it's a little strange, but I like it.
It's a little cross genre. It's not exactly several different things. Yeah,
it doesn't fit neatly anywhere at all, but I love it. I just made my husband I made him read it by ordering the corporeal versions of the books and just sitting them on his nightstand. That's how I made him read them. I'm
very amused that you guys call them corporeal books. I like that.
I never called it that until she started to call it. I'm like, that's a good word. I like that word. I'm going to start using it.
Good word.
I don't know. I feel like I was so anti-e-reader for so long, personally, until I had my kid. And then my husband bought me my first Kindle when I had our baby. And postpartum hit me real hard, really hard. And it was reading like some of the free people on Kindle Unlimited and you, and starting some of the Kate Daniels stuff and some of Miss Grace's stuff that really started like that, and sitting on Lee's kitchen floor drinking beers and crying are what started to pull me out of the postpartum mess and make me realize I was probably not as okay as I thought I was, as I was trying to convince myself I was.
Well, everyone says, like, you're just supposed to be so happy. It's like, oh, treasure these days because you have this brand new baby. Treasure every moment. And you're like, yes, but I'm miserable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just hard. It's really hard. And I had a really rough pregnancy, had a pretty rough birth. Life was just kind of crazy because my husband switched careers while we were pregnant so that he would be making more money at the point we're at now. And it was a really hard year, and it kind of all came crashing down on my head when he went back to work after I had the baby. And I realized how in over my head I was and how much I was pretending when my daughter was 6 months old and I hadn't read a book since before she was born.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Like there's a noticeable difference in my mental health when I read and when I don't. So I'd been so anti-ebook, and then I started reading everything on my Kindle. And so now I'm very much like, I used to sneer at like, oh, it's an ebook, which was wrong. And I used to very much be one of those, I need the physical book. I need the weight. I need to smell the dead trees and hallucinate with their ink. And it just started as a way for me to be like, this is differentiating and accurate, but neither is better than the other. My husband still only reads corporeal books. So if it's a series I really like, I'll just order them and slap them on his nightstand. Be like, here, babe.
My assistant does too. She loves to read paper books.
Yeah.
And I almost won't read on paper now because it like hurts my hands to hold them, and I can't adjust the font or the light. And so I feel like I'm a total ebook princess now. It has to be exactly soft and right.
I am right there with you. I own the entire Court of Thorn and Roses series, both corporeal and on ebook, and Crescent City, and Kate Daniels, and all of the ones that like I've bought for my husband that I'm making him read through, and a couple other ones. Kingdom of the Wicked was one that I also got on my Kindle because I like to burrito myself in bed and just have my little thing that I have to hold with one hand and just tap with my thumb. And I can't do that with a 3-pound book. So it's a comfort thing for sure.
It's always bad because I tend to, especially at night, like when I'm about to go to, like when I'm going to sleep, is I have the hardback book, like, because Chain of Iron is the hardback I'm reading now, and like it's a big ass book, so like I'll be reading and I'll fall asleep and it just drops to the floor, and so it's this huge clunk at like 2 a.m, and I'm like, oh man. At this point, my husband's used to it. He's like, whatever. But at the beginning, it's kind of like, oh my god, what is that? I'm like, it's just my book. I'm falling asleep. It's okay. But
yeah, it's a chunk. That is my official title for books like that, and like Court of Silver Flames. Like, this is a book, and also it's a melee weapon. So when was your first book published? Because I'm looking, and like your biography has Mark of the Tala in 2014, but that's not when you were first published, is it?
It's not. So it depends on.
I didn't think so.
I've had a long and torturous career. My very first book was an essay collection called Wyoming Truck's True Love and the Weather Channel. And that came out in 2004. And then I ended up switching over to fiction, which is kind of a long story. But I had written this fantasy romance that it was before anybody knew what fantasy romance was. And I couldn't, no one would buy it. I kept getting all these. I didn't realize how lucky I was because I was querying agents, and I was getting full manuscript requests and all of this. And then they're like, oh, this is a great story and you write really well. And I have absolutely zero idea how to market this story.
yeah.
And I ended up selling that one to Carina Press eventually. And that was Rogue's Pawn. So that's a trilogy called Covenant of Thorns. Yeah.
I haven't actually read that one. I need to.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird enough. There are things that, like, if I were going to go back and change things, I would change that one. I know there are people who love that trilogy, but it is a little bit wildly bizarre. I was still figuring things out. But before I even sold that book, my very first book that I sold was a BDSM Beauty and the Beast called Petals and Thorns.
What?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm
need
familiar.
to read this. What? I'm sorry. I am missing something.
So it was like I don't, I've always loved Beauty and the Beast, but it's like there was this whole thing about, like what really happened at night. And I really wanted to write this story. So I wrote this BDSM Beauty and the Beast, and it was the first like thing that I sold like that.
Wow. Well, that's going to go on my TBR list.
Yeah.
Not that it needs more books right now. but
it's not long. It's a pretty fast read, and it's I mean, we already went over that this is like the adult content show, right? It's obviously kinky. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I appreciate about you as an author, just like reading over a couple different things, because I've read most of the I've read all of the Misconnections. I may have not read Since Last Christmas. But I definitely read Last Dance and With a Prince. With a Prince made me really mad at the end, and then I got over it. And
I we'll have to talk about that, but keep going.
You write very clearly in different genres, and the waters are so muddied now between what the different genres are. Like you make a difference between fantasy with romantic elements and fantasy romance, and just fantasy and just romance. And I am super curious to know like how that breaks down in your head. And do you know when you start a story or when you have an idea, like where, because like obviously between contemporary romance or fantasy romance, you know where that's gonna fit in. But like Sorceress Moons had some very lovely BDSM elements, but it wasn't a BDSM romance. It was definitely, fantasy side of things. Like, do you know what genre it's going to fit in while you're writing it? Do you decide that early on? Or do you just kind of get partway through and you're like, this fits in here?
I would say it's more the latter, and I wouldn't even say it's partway through. I would say it's when it's done. And a lot of times that decision is made by my publisher if it's trad-pubbed. Like I didn't know I wrote fantasy romance until that was what Garena Press called those books. And like Forgotten Empires, St. Martin's called them romantic fantasy. I was like, okay, well, whatever you guys want to call them. When I do the self-publishing, like the ones that I've been doing this year, I have the 2 series that I'm self-publishing this year. The Heirs of Magic, which I am calling epic fantasy romance, and then Bonds of Magic. I didn't mean to make those 2 series so similar, but it's too late now. I'm calling dark fantasy romance.
Yeah, that makes sense, though.
Does it? Because I'm just trying to give readers an idea of what they're in for, because Heirs of Magic is much lighter and
it is
more whimsical in some ways.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I think I haven't read the second one in the series yet. It's on my Kindle, but I think the people are younger than they are.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it fits. But it's funny because like you go on Amazon and you look at these books and you're like, ranked 253rd in Paranormal Love Triangle Academy Teenage. Oh no, maybe he likes me, maybe he doesn't romance. And you're like, that's a whole genre. Okay.
Well, and some of that's coming from Amazon, and people are learning to maximize these subcategories so that they can be like number 1 in this little niche subcategory that Amazon has created. And I mean, that's where all of that's coming from. And it's kind of weird because you get these books that are deliberately camping out in these subcategories because they want to have those very high rankings within the subcategory, even if the book has nothing to do with that.
Like bully romance. I still don't understand what that means, but I don't like it. It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things when you were asking me what I was reading recently, I tried reading this one that was a high school bully romance just because I was curious. I read stuff I read a lot of samples. I don't have Kindle Unlimited, but I get a lot of samples and start reading the things. And I was just like, okay.
Some of these things, I read them and I'm like in chapter 4, and I understand I'm a 35-year-old lady. Academy romances, bully, whatever, are not geared towards me. I don't want my daughter to read this in a decade and think that this is okay. And there's a lot of that in books. I understand there is, but I'm just like, what? And it's like, if that's your thing, hey, you know what? Some people juggle geese and that's fine. But it becomes very obvious that some of these sub genres are just, what do they call the next generation? Generation Z? It's for them. It's not for me. Like, very far into not the target audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing because some of it's about the fantasy. So much of it is, it's like that the alpha hole hero,
Sure.
or, some of these things or the reverse harem where we're like, in real life, we figure it'd be exhausting to have 7 men, but there's something about the fantasy that's appealing. And so it's like, well,
yeah.
I feel like that should, like, both things should be okay, right? That you can.
Yeah, that's true. So for these with the self-publishing and all these subgenres, like, is it something you've just had to learn to navigate through trial and error? Or did you still have somebody, like, help you navigate it? Because it's my understanding that there are people out there that just kind of know how to navigate, like, the self-publishing thing, and they'll help authors with that. Like, how does that work for your experience?
Well, it's one of those things that it's not always easy to find the good information. And sometimes the loudest voices are yelling the worst information because there's a lot of self-aggrandizement.
So you've been on Twitter.
I have been on the Twitters, yes. You have to figure out who the good people are. One person I think who gives great self-publishing advice is David Cochran. I'm on the board of directors for Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. There's my plug for SFWA. And we gave the Solstice Service Award last year to David Cochran because he's one of the voices who does give good self-publishing advice. But then there's other services too, like there's a thing called Publisher Rocket, which you can subscribe to, and they give you tutorials and they teach you how to pick keywords and categories to maximize your visibility on Amazon. So a lot of people are doing that, and using that power for both good and evil, as all powers are used. And, it can be good. I use it and it's made a difference.
Okay.
And I'm hearing, at least the theories that are running around right now, is that Amazon is going to start cleaning up this deliberate camping out in the subcategories of books that don't really belong there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I've heard rumors of that too. I'll be interested to see, because sometimes, now this is solely from a reader perspective, so I could be very wrong, and feel free to correct me. But I feel like sometimes when Amazon tries to help, they just like start cleaning up or start implementing new things. And you're like, no, just stop. Just stop. Nope, we're good. Please stop. Like with the whole reporting and error thing.
My gosh. Yes. Yeah, that's caused a lot of headaches.
Yeah. To the point that like some authors, I'm going to butcher her last name. Do you know who is Thasala? Laura Thasala? She's Thasala? She does.
Laura Thalassa.
Yes. Thank you. I'm sorry. I obviously don't do the audiobook thing. So like I can spell them and Lee can say them. Her work is really, really good. The Queen of All That Dies, that series is just like perfection. She did Rhapsodic. But there was this whole thread in a couple weeks ago in, I guess it's her fan Facebook group or something, about how some authors are just putting like, we'll enter you in a raffle if you just email us instead of reporting errors or what you think are errors to Amazon because they are such a pain in the butt to fix. And what started it, and just as a reader, this made me so incensed. I was like, do you not remember going to the library when you did not have this option? Someone was like, what do you consider a big enough error to report? And I'm like, they have paid for an editor. I don't. Like, I don't know if I've ranted to you about this, Lee. if enough people report an error and there's like no one who goes through and reviews these things like Facebook or Twitter, a book can get pulled from Amazon.
Yeah, you sent me a whole thread and I was just like, okay, that's a terrifying thought I'm not going to think about right now.
Yeah. So hopefully their help won't be like that. Have you found that to be an issue for you? Or is it just a random nonsense thing that hits some people?
I am fortunate in that I have one of those brains where typos stand out to me like they're in a different color ink. And so I'm not saying that it's not impossible. There are errors that I'm aware of that have made it through in my books. But I tend to write very clean copy and I pay a proofreader. So I'm fortunate in that I have very few errors. But not everybody is able to do that. And it can be a real, it's a funny thing because Amazon's fixating on this error thing when that's not the real quality that actually needs to be controlled. What we'd like them to control is the 14-page complete crap stories like you were mentioning earlier that are just like, why is this even here?
Yeah, did you see the thing? Love story about an Allosaurus? That's my line for erotica, personally.
Dinosaurs? Or Allosaurs in particular? I mean...
No, just dinosaurs.
Is it just Allosaurs that aren't sexy?
No, just dinosaurs in particular. I'm a weird dinosaur kid. I have a parasaur skull tattooed on my forearm with, like, southern wildflowers and a gardenia. So, like, that crosses my line. I can't. Like, I tried to read a shifter book once where a guy shifted into a Utah raptor and I'm like, I can't. There's my line. There's my personal weird line. That's what it is. Like, more gold ribbons around my nipples, less dinosaur teeth. I know what I'm about now. Although I will give the person that wrote Kissing the Coronavirus this, even though it was just 16 pages of, that's the Hulk. You banged the Hulk in a science lab. Okay. They saw the opportunity and they took it. There's something to be said for that, I suppose.
It's a certain level of entrepreneurship that's admirable.
Yes.
I'll tell you one thing that's annoying about the Amazon quality control thing is that they send you this when you self-publish the book, that they send you this list of potential spelling errors. And they'll be like all my made up fantasy words.
The fuck does that work in fantasy? Yeah, sorry.
It's like, yes, I know this does not appear in any dictionary. I cannot help you. Ignore. Just ignore.
That's the point. Thank you. I appreciate you telling me my work is original.
They should have like an add to, remember like the word, like had the add to dictionary button. Just feel like, shut up, add to dictionary. It is now a term.
Which I totally do in my Word documents. I write in Word and I'm forever adding to the dictionary. Like, yes. Stop telling me this is not a word.
My Google Docs, no, it's Grammarly I have on my computer. My Grammarly is just like, that's not a word. And I'm like, yes, it is. Just add it. It's fine. And I looked at my list a couple weeks ago and I was like, oh, okay.
I will tell you a cool fantasy word hack, though, is that you can program autocorrect to fill in your weird fantasy words, especially if you're like me and you throw in some letters with accents and so forth on them. So like, for the ship, the Hackerling, which appears in a couple of my series, which has a couple of accents in there and weird spelling, I've got my autocorrect set up, so I just have to type KYR, and it fills in Hackerling in italics for me.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yes. So I don't have to remember how I spelled my weird fantasy words.
Yeah. I was doing a writing just exercise, like, it will never see the light of day, but like this book story I have on the back burner because it was rattling around my head and you have to like either get it out or it just annoys you. And I gave this one person a really weird name, and I was reading through first 5,000 words. I had said their name 6 times, spelt it different every time. I was like, oh, I should pick one. Yeah. So one thing that Lee and I are both curious about, especially since she's gotten into audiobooks lately, is how does that work as far as traditional publishing versus self-publishing? I would imagine with traditional publishing, they just tell you whether or not you're going to get an audiobook and you're just like, okay, thanks. And then with self-publishing, it's probably much more involved, I would assume.
Yes. So in a word, yes. With trad publishing, you almost always end up giving them the audio rights when they buy the first publication rights. It's really hard to negotiate otherwise. Maybe if you're really big and important, you could, but most part you don't, which can be annoying because like for me with St. Martin's and Forgotten Empires, they were great. They sold the audio rights for all 3 books right off the bat, which was a huge relief because it's like, great, all 3 books will be on audio. As opposed to the 12 Kingdoms trilogy, where Kensington put the Mark of the Tala on audio, and then they have never put the other 2 books in that trilogy or the 2 Uncharted Realms books, including my RITA winner, on audio.
What?
And so I get...
What?
And I know, and they're just...
I don't listen to audiobooks, so I've never paid attention, but wow.
Yeah, they're just sitting on those audio rights. And I keep asking, I'm like, if you guys are not going to exercise them, can I have them back? And they're like, oh, And I get regular emails from people saying, when is the rest of the trilogy going to be on audio? When are you going to do that? And I'm like, when the stars fall, I don't know.
Oh, no.
Yeah. For self-publishing, it is, I don't know, in some ways, no less fraught. You retain the rights to do your audio, but it's very expensive. For a novel, it's generally in the neighborhood of about $3,000 up front, unless you do a royalty share, which isn't there. That's also not a great idea for a lot of reasons. So, so it can be difficult to set up. So I can tell you guys that right now I am negotiating to have the Sorceress Moon's books put into audio.
Oh, hell yeah. Sorry.
No, that's an awesome response. That's what we're looking
Guess
for.
what you're getting for your birthday, Lee.
Yeah, so it's not an amazing deal, but I'm probably going to take it because it means that I don't have to front, 6 books. I don't have to front like $15,000 to put them in audio.
Wow.
This is something I very lightly heard about, and I could have misunderstood. But it seems like there's also like it's not a kickback. It's what you get for selling a book on Audible through Amazon, from what I understand, is not great. Like, it takes a while to recoup your investment on an audiobook. Am I correct? You
are correct. And it just depends. But the common wisdom right now, what I'm hearing from most people is if you self-publish, if you release the audiobook at the same time as the digital version, then you will recoup your investment much faster. But if you don't, which most people don't, and like for me, it would be like way too late with Sorcerer's Moons, right? That ship has sailed. Then it can take years.
Wow.
And so, that's a lot of money to invest with not seeing return for a while.
It almost seems like it's just an investment in your readership, or if you do it at the same time, to be released at the same time as the regular or corporeal book, it's almost like it's an advertising investment is how it seems, because it's just...
Yeah, I can see that. Or people choose their format. They choose their preferred one, and like for Lee, if the audio's not available, she might go for digital or paper instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And of course, pandemic changed that, right? It totally changed listening habits.
It changed listening habits for podcasts a lot because kids were home. Not all podcasts are like, this is not a listen to the kids podcast. My child loves, she's known Lee since she was born. Lee's oldest kid and my kid are the same age within like 2 months. So she thinks our podcast is just the intro because I let her listen to just the intro. So you've got that issue with everybody having their kids home, and then people don't commute anymore. And like my husband used to listen to all his podcasts on commute, and apparently so did a lot of other people. Oops.
Yeah. The loss of commute is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you find do you track your listeners with First Cup of Coffee, or do you just kind of like put it out in the ether so you can hang out with us and it is what it is?
To some extent, I let it be. It is what it is. I'm part of like that Frolic Media Podcast Network, and there are lots of people on there who are always like, grow your show and equipment, and doing all of the podcasting things. And I'm like, for me, the podcast is something that supports the books. That's my primary thing. So to some extent, I don't obsess. I do look at my stats, and I did notice a big drop when the commutes went away. It was like the listener downloads went down by like half or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. Because I had a podcast before this one. It was very, very different. And I don't think they're contrary. Like, if you want to find out about it, I'll tell you later. But it ended right around the time the pandemic started. But it would have been interesting if it had kept going to see what the listenership did. And what we found is, we started last September. So we haven't done this for a year yet, but we are in all the podcast groups and all that jazz. And a lot of people are like, yeah, no, we're figuring out new tricks. A lot of people are either doing much longer form content, or a lot of people are doing shorter content like you do with First Cup of Coffee. So by the way, for those of you that don't know and haven't listened when I've talked about it before, Jeffe has a podcast called First Cup of Coffee. You can hear about her coffee and a lot of, like, if you're a writer, it's really good info, like really, really good stuff. Take notes. And you also get to hear about her plants. So it's like, that's all my things right there is coffee and writing and plants. It's my jam.
And cats
Yes.
and New Mexico weather.
Yes. Truth. It's all my favorite things, basically.
Well, thank you. That makes me really happy. I mean, mine is not professionally produced. I don't edit. It's very off the cuff.
But it's nice because one of the things I've missed the most with the pandemic is having coffee with a friend. And so like Lee and I, we need to do it because we haven't done it in the last few weeks because of children craziness. But like we'll usually Zoom and have coffee once a week since I moved up here. But like just going out and having a beer or a cup of coffee with friends, like I miss it. And it's that same, like it's not exactly the same because we're not sitting in front of each other and we're not really having a back and forth conversation, but it's that same chill vibe, right? It's
yes,
nice.
that's what I hope for.
It lowers my blood pressure and it gives me happy things to think about. It's always good.
That's funny. A lot of people tell me that it's very soothing and relaxing, which I think is funny because that's not how I perceive myself, but that's great.
You have cool aunt vibes very strongly. It's a good thing. You do writer workshops and author coaching. Would you like to talk about that? Because I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I do various kinds. I kind of tailor the author coaching to what people need. I'm very much into helping people discover what their process is and be more productive with it. So it's been interesting to me that I have people that I coach from rank newbies who are still trying to figure out how to produce words in the first place, to a couple of my friends who are like New York Times bestsellers who just want to get better at doing what they're doing. And so that's been really cool. It's been cool to know that I can offer that to people. One of my, I guess, my main thrusts, and I had to learn it myself, is to consistently create words and to find how I could be creative and deliver on deadline, like we're talking about, that I could predict what my deadlines would be and whether or not I could meet them. So that's been really important because, like some people, like I could tell you, and I don't think she would mind, like we've talked about Grace Draven, Grace won't do pre-orders or give herself a deadline because it's just way too stressful for her and she knows she's going to miss it.
Mm-hmm. But I understand that, like, not going into detail, that totally makes sense for what she has shared on Facebook about her life. Like, to me,
yeah, her life is crazy in a way that mine is not. And every once in a while, when we schedule a monthly phone call where we talk for several hours, and just because that's how our lives are. But sometimes we do talk more often. But that's no matter what, we have that conversation. But she'll make caustic remarks to me about, like, well, if I could write as fast as you do, but she has a lot of challenges and demands on her time that I don't have, and I really do believe that we have to learn to work within the demands on our lives. You have to choose your priorities, and like you guys both have small children, and it's like you don't get to choose not to feed the children.
Mm-hmm.
No, I can feed myself coffee for 24 hours, but if I do that to the kids, someone's going to call the authorities.
Yeah, there's laws. Yeah.
Yeah.
People would think badly of you. Well.
That whole thing. Yeah.
But then I also I teach workshops. Various groups hire me to do. I mean, that's been one thing about the pandemic, is so much more in the way of Zoom workshops, all these things I've been doing that before they would have had me travel to go there. And, now I can take an hour or two out of my day and do it. So that's cool. I like teaching. It's fun.
Teaching's very fun. Yeah. I taught English as a second language for like 10 years, and I loved it. I tried to go back after the kids were born, and it was a little bit more challenging to do, but I really enjoyed that time. So I'll eventually probably go back to some form of teaching, because it's just, I don't know, there's a certain energy and vibe that I get in just talking to people. So, but
yeah. Well, and then it's really cool when people light up when they get something and they're like, oh, this is really working for me. I get it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you prefer, I know that you mentioned that as far as like your time demands for, going like places in person versus like Zoom, like do you miss going to places, or is it more like, oh, thank God it's in Zoom because now I can, be at home?
It's funny because it's some of both. I feel like, this whole pandemic year plus for all of us has been such an education, because at first it felt like, everything slowed down so much, and it was like, well, what do we do with ourselves? And now that things are ramping up again, it's like, whoa, things are going so fast, and what is this? It was surprising to me, because I am an introvert, that I hadn't realized how much of my social interaction had come from going to conferences. And so I really missed. Yeah, I that was the huge thing from like 2020. It was, my intense few days, 3 or 4 days of being at a conference and sitting with my friends and drinking wine and talking. And then I would come home and crash for 2 weeks. But suddenly I wasn't getting that same social interaction anymore.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting to me to learn. And then it's been cool to be able to do all these events for bookstores and libraries that I would not have done otherwise. if we didn't have the access to Zoom and so forth. But then the downside of that has been that I'm spending so much time on Zoom and you get so much Zoom fatigue. And people will be like, oh, well, can you just do this thing for us? It would just be an hour on Zoom. Can you just hop on? And it's like,
no.
Yeah, but I have 20 of those this week.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
No, Lee and I have Zoom rules because we told you before we started talking about that other project we're doing together. Turns out doing that kind of project together is a lot of conversations about things. Sometimes 3 or 4 hour Zoom sessions. And we plan those out very far in advance. And we take breaks every 45 minutes to an hour. Otherwise, it's too much. Zoom fatigue is real. Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading that Zoom actually creates this cognitive dissonance that because we can see people's faces and hear their voices, that our brains expect them to be present and starts looking for body cues that we're accustomed to having from people being present. And then when we don't get that, it's like our phones being on search for a signal and it drains the battery down.
Yes,
really?
I read that. It may not have been the same thing, but it was similar. Yes. And also that it must have been a different one because this was a while, like when the pandemic was only a few months old, about how even though we're on camera and people can only see us from the shoulders or waist or whatever up, we feel like we're completely... Like, we don't feel like we're just sitting in a crowd listening to someone talk when we're on a Zoom call. If the camera's on, we feel the same anxiety, maybe on a lesser level, as if we're public speaking. Mm-hmm. And even if you like public speaking and you're an extrovert, like, damn, it's a lot.
Still, being on stage is tiring.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's the performance part of your brain.
Yeah.
Even though this podcast is really chill, even though First Cup of Coffee is really chill, like it's a different part of your brain than sitting here, drinking wine, eating Cheetos, and arguing with yourself about what adverb you're going to use in this scene or watching YouTube videos about Disney World. Like it's different. Not that that's totally what I'm going to do when we're done tonight. But yeah, and it's you said something about how things are ramping up, and my husband, I've talked about this before, he's autistic. He's what they would have called several years ago high functioning autistic, but he's also incredibly introverted. And so like as things start ramping up again, I'm not incredibly extroverted. Lee can tell you, if you want me to go on an adventure with you, I need 2 weeks notice and an itinerary.
Yep.
Yep. Even if it's Ren Fair, I'm just like, I didn't mentally prepare myself for 48 hours to go to Tampa for Ren Fair. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I am a true introvert. I just have a big mouth. And like figuring out how we're going to step our social interaction back up slowly is like, because there's some people, and you can tell the extroverts, they're like, yeah, I'm gonna go to all the places, and I'm like, I'm gonna go to Trader Joe's and Target and go inside the store in the same day. That's my social interaction. And it's as much adjustment as it was for the pandemic, it didn't hit me until like a week ago that's going to be, we're adjusting everything all over again. This is just, yay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Adjusting to the old and to the new. Because I feel like there's things from the pandemic that are going to stick, because it's like, oh, that's convenient. Let's keep doing that. Whether it's a good idea or not. So.
Like Target pickup. I'm down.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that podcast listens go up as the pandemic comes to a close. Is that selfish?
No, I think we're all on board with that.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that that's everything we had on our list. Is there anything else we didn't touch on that you feel like you would like to touch on?
Well, it's completely self-absorbed, but let's talk about my favorite subject, me and my work, because...
Yes, Plug all the things.
You were talking about that you really liked Dark Wizard. And so I'm curious, what we haven't really talked about that story or that series. Why did you like that one so much? And I know Lee hasn't read it, right?
Not yet, no.
I am going to sound like a broken record. I liked it. This might be a little bit spoilery. They make the whoop-de-doo by choice at the end, not because it's the thing they have to do. What I really like about this story in particular is that the coming together of them as a couple and them starting to fall in love with each other is not just about what, and this has nothing to do with fantasy and magic. I'm so sorry, because it is a really good world and a really good magic system. It's not just them learning more about the other person. It's them having the freedom, or in his case, the necessity, to learn more about themselves. And they're finding their values and their paths are more aligned than they realize. And like, this is cheesy AF, and I'm sorry, but like, my husband reminds me of the best parts of myself. He is my life partner, and we laugh together, and we talk about our nerdy best things together, and we have deep conversations about magic systems and moralities. And he has, in so many ways, particularly spiritually, which is a whole other conversation, helped me discover parts of myself that have made me the best version of myself I've ever been. And that's the vibe I get from them. And I am here for it.
I like that. That's really great to hear.
Like, magic systems are great. I love me some magic systems. I have books about them. If I'm really, really sober and Lee is drunk, she will just let me be like, and talk about like chaotic magic versus, yeah. But character development in a realistic way with characters that are not only complex and somewhat flawed, but also growing through the story in a way that people around you would grow, or that you within your personal growth can connect with organically. That's my jam. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm just curious because a lot of people have really responded well to that book. And so I'm just interested to hear why.
The fact that he's really hot, and like, I know the guy on the cover doesn't look like what's his face hot dude from The Witcher. You can tell I'm at the bottom of my glass of wine because I can't remember his name. Henry Cavill with the jawline. Like, that doesn't hurt. The sexiness, the magic, these are all very interesting things. And they put the story and the characters in a world that you care about more than just the two of them. And I really like the premise of her sleeping with the guys, and she gets to pick the guys she sleeps with, but the one that makes her pregnant is the one she's stuck with. That's kind of fucked up. But it's obvious that was your intent. So, like, it really works very well as a story device. But, like, that's really cool. And I like the premise of, you know, and I feel like we're going to get more into this as the series goes on for sure. Even the most powerful aren't free. They're all slaves to this stupid system that they've all bought into because it keeps them powerful, and they're powerful, but they're not free. And they can't just look at each other and be like, this is dumb. We should stop doing this.
I'm really curious now. I really need to read this book.
I told you that like a month ago.
I know. I just need to read faster.
So many books, so little time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Such a big problem.
I'm also super excited to see, now that she's there, what happens with his family. Like, just that little taste, that was not enough. I need more of that, which I'm assuming we're going to get in the next book.
Yes.
So I have a quick, is this like your favorite, what's your favorite book that you've written so far?
Oh, you know, that's so hard to answer because it's kind of like your kids. You know, it's like, which kid is your favorite? You know, sort of a different one at different times, depending on which one's being a jerk. But, you know, I have different favorites for different reasons. But, it tends to be very much love the one you're with. It's like whichever one I am writing or most recently written tends to be my favorite.
Gotcha. Which I guess is good because that's the one you're really wanting to invest the time and energy into.
Yes, there's nothing worse than trying to write a book that you don't like because you're supposed to write it or you have a deadline or something and you're having to make yourself write it. That's the worst. Yeah.
Yeah.
You sure it's not the one with the gold ribbons on the nipples though? Because like that was insane.
So wait, which one is that? Are you thinking of 5 Golden?
It's one of the Sorceress Moons ones.
Okay, so because I can think of ways that I've done that in 3 different books. So okay, so it was Sorceress
I'm
Moons.
so bad with titles. Like I can tell you the series. My poor husband, as he's reading through, he's in like book 7 of the Kate Daniels series, and I've read them more than once. They're one of my comfort series. I have no idea what the names of the books are, so I'll just lean over when we're in bed and be like, tell me what's happening on the page you're on now, because then I'll understand where you are in the book.
Right. No, I know what you mean. So it was Araya's Gambit that had the gold ribbons.
Yeah. That will forever stick out as one of my favorite scenes, not just because it was a little kinky, but because he was just so very in charge yet so careful with her. Yes. Yeah. Damn good times.
I love
as
that.
Every dom should be, to clarify.
Very true. Absolutely true.
All right. So where can we find you aside from Amazon.com if people are listening and they haven't heard my loquacious fangirling on other episodes and they're like, oh, I guess now I'll read her books or look into her. Where can people find you?
So my website's the easiest place, jeffekennedy.com. Pretty straightforward. And from there, there's links. I'm on pretty much all the social media, Instagram and Twitters and Facebook and Goodreads and BookBub. And then my podcast is linked to the website, so you can find First Cup of Coffee there. And I do that 4 days a week for 20 minutes in the morning.
Awesome. And if you would like to find us, we are on Twitter and Facebook and the internet in general as Paper and Vices or paperandvices.com. We are on Goodreads as Lee Vices or Victoria Papers. And we do have a Patreon if you would like to sign up and support this craziness, because even $2 Chuck costs $2. And we have sparkly pins and stickers, of course. But yeah, thank you so much for hanging out with us, Jeffe. This just makes my little nerd heart so happy, and I really appreciate it, and it's been a good time.
It's been very fun.
So the release date for Promise Queen is the 25th?
25th of May.
25th of May. So buy the book, read the first 2, and then buy the book. And then don't be an asshole, smoke a joint, and take care of yourself.
This has been a production of Paper and Vices, copyright 2021. This episode is presented for entertainment purposes only, and any vice should be pursued only within the legal boundaries, common sense, and personal responsibility of each person. Please check your local laws. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the individual hosts and guests only, and do not in any way represent the views of Paper and Vices LLC or any named persons, nor should they be considered personal, medical, or legal advice. Previous episodes and other commentary can be found at paperandvices.com.